Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're finishing up our study of chapter 3 in the Gospel of Mark. As part of our study of Mark's Gospel, we're going to pick up with verse 20 and we're going to read through verse 35. And we need to take these verses together and we need to take them seriously because Jesus does. He's going to talk about the unforgivable sin, an eternal sin that you can commit and never be forgiven of. And so our ears need to perk up and take this seriously. It begins with Jesus going home. Let's not forget, he has moved his family to Capernaum and he's living there, has a house there. It begins with his family trying to take legal custody of him by saying that he's insane. This is very serious. And then the high priests, the priests from Jerusalem, have come down. Even though they're traveling north, when you leave Jerusalem, you go down any place else. And they're saying he's doing this by the power of Beelzebul. And we'll talk about what that means in a bit. And then Jesus says, you better be careful that you don't commit the unpardonable sin. And then his family shows up again. And the crowd wants to know why he won't go out and talk to his family. They're a little surprised at Jesus' action. And he says, who are my mother and my brothers? It's you people. It's everyone around me. Everyone who believes in me. You're my family. My family are made up of people who believe in me and who I am. Let's read the verses. He came home, and the multitude gathered again to such an extent that they could not even eat a meal. And when his own people heard of this, they went to take custody of him, for they were saying, he's lost his senses. And the scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying, he's possessed by Beelzebul, and he casts out the demons by the ruler of the demons. And he called them, that is the scribes who come down from Jerusalem. He calls them to himself, and he began speaking to them in parables. Now, not telling stories like we think of parables, but to make comparisons, which is what the word parable means. And he says, how can Satan cast out Satan? Simply stated as that. And then he says, if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom can't stand. And if a house is divided himself, that house will not be able to stand. Mom. And if Satan has risen up against himself and is divided, he cannot stand, but he is finished. No one can enter the strong man's house and plunder his property unless he first binds the strong man, and then he will plunder his house. I'm plundering the house of Satan. I'm not Satan, and I'm not his prince. I'm the plunderer. The gates of hell cannot prevail against me and my kingdom. Truly I say to you, all sins shall be forgiven the sons of men, and whatever blasphemies they utter. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit never has forgiveness, but is guilty of an eternal sin. He said this because they were saying he has an unclean spirit. His mother and brothers arrived, and standing outside, they sent word to him, and he called them, and called him. And the multitude sitting around him said, behold, your mother and your brothers are outside looking for you. And answering them, he said, who are my mother and my brothers? And looking around at those who were sitting around him, he said, look at my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother. This is so important. It is so risky what's going on here. No one denies the miracles that Jesus is performing. But then his own people, remember John said he came to his own people and they rejected him. His own family members, his mother and brothers are trying to take custody of him, to end his ministry, trying to claim that he's insane. And they know he's not insane, but they don't want to go through this anymore. And they want him just to be quiet. And maybe taking a cue from his family, the scribes who come down from Jerusalem, they're the representatives of the powers that be. The Sanhedrin, the great synagogue at the temple, the high priests, they say, oh, he's doing this by the power of Beelzebul. Now, Beelzebub is referred to in 1 Kings chapter 1, the first 6 or 8 verses, as being a deity worshipped by the people of Ekron. And it's unclear exactly what Beelzebub means, but Beelzebub came to be a slur meaning Lord of the Flies, and Beelzebul is a slur further still, which means Lord of Dung. And this person became a character in extra biblical literature and in Jewish literature, not only in the first century but beyond, as Satan's archangel, as his prince. And that's what they're saying. Yeah, he can do this, but it's not from God. It's from Satan himself. And Jesus calls them to him. He doesn't do this publicly. He's having a private conversation with these scribes. And he said, listen, you better be careful. Now, a kingdom divided, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Satan doesn't drive out Satan. You know this. So stop this. If Satan's house is being plundered, it's because I'm the strong man who binds him and can plunder his house. And when he says a house divided against itself cannot stand, I know he has in his mind and is making reference to what his mother and brothers are trying to do to him. And he says, I'm going to give you a warning, and you better take heed. And evidently they do, because the Bible doesn't say they ever repeat this. He said, you can be forgiven of anything, even blaspheming the Father. But if you blaspheme the Holy Spirit, that is an eternal sin that will never be forgiven you. So you better stop it right now. And they did, evidently. Now, what did they do? Well, they were looking at the miracles of Jesus and admitting that they occurred, and were saying that the power that empowered him was the power of Satan. And that's what flirted dangerously close to blaspheming the Holy Spirit. Can we do this day? If we do this specifically and go one step beyond. I'm not saying you cannot commit the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. I'm saying you have to do specifically what these guys were doing and then go one step beyond it. So I don't think you and I have any reason to fear. There may be some Satanists and enemies of the Word that have over the years committed an unforgivable sin, but you have to admit that Jesus has the power to do what he does, and then say that power is the power of the devil, and then do something even beyond that. Because these men are not being condemned, they're being warned. So they haven't committed this sin yet, but they're about to. And then we have Jesus' mother and brothers coming, and Jesus does not in any way respect their request that he come out, but he goes on teaching. And it confuses people, maybe even upsets people that he's not being more attentive to his mother when she calls him. And he looks around and says, listen, my family are the people who believe in me. Does this mean that Jesus has abdicated his responsibility to his family? No. It does not mean that at all. Because what does he do on the cross? What's one of the last things he does? When he's hanging there on the cross, he takes care of his mom. He takes care of his mom. Because he has not abdicated that responsibility. But he will not permit them to torpedo his ministry, which is what they are doing and others are doing because of the things they've said. And therefore, they're not welcome in this crowd at this time. Well, thank you for joining me. What is now almost 9 good minutes with the Word. We'll pick up in chapter 4 next time.